Hello, it's 12 o'clock and it's time to start the webinar. And I want to welcome you to our first monthly webinar following the State of Europe's Forest Report in 2025. The title of today's webinar is Rising Forest Damage in Europe, Risk Drivers and Policy Responses. And this webinar will be moderated by FoRISK coordinator Silvia Abruscato. In addition to Silvia, we will meet and listen to experts from 3 different European countries presenting interesting cases for us. Unfortunately, we will not be able to answer questions from the audience during this short webinar, but we will collect them and try to answer them afterwards. And then we will publish the answers on Forest Europe's website. This webinar will also be recorded. First, I will give you some short introduction with the findings concerning forest damages from the SoEF 2025 report. So, what was in this report? It was published in March, and forest damage is one of the criteria. There are some indicators in this report. I will speak very shortly about what was found here. Forest damage is still, that's been seen in earlier report as well, one of the most critical threats to Europe's forest. And climate change is identified as a key driver. The total forest area affected by forest damages is increasing. Insect damage is increasing, and also forest disease is increasing. Some specific damage factors, then we have storms, wildfires, insects, but also browsing from deer, for example, and snow damages. Other more diffuse damages like tree health and defoliation is increasing. Drought and heat stress are identified as primary drivers for the declining tree health. They're not isolated either, so forest damage increasingly occurs through interacting and cascading events. For example, there can be insects coming after storms and wind throws. Many European countries have strengthened their forest health frameworks and monitoring to prevent and monitor these damages. But there are we have to move more from the reactive to the proactive management. Get more a look of this. And with that, I want short introduction. I want to hand over to our moderator, Silvia Abruscato from FoRISK. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. Thank you to the LUS team for organizing and inviting me on behalf of FoRISK. Dear distinguished delegates, it's a big pleasure to guide you through this webinar, which is strictly connected to FoRISK work. This webinar is the first of the SoEF 2025 webinar series that, as also Johan presented, was launched last month. We have also noticed, and we know quite well, that natural disturbances are increasing in Pan-Europe. Johan just presented the data from SoEF 2025, but we also have additional scientific evidence that also goes along with this prediction. I wish to, if you allow me, also to give now a bit of an overview of also what's present out there. And we have came to our desk in FoRISK that a paper from Gruning et al. Was published in March in the most renowned publicators. We had seen that forest disturbances in Europe will also continue to increase over the coming decades under all the climate change scenario. In this paper has been also mentioned that if we look at the rates of disturbance between 2021 and 2100, Based actually on AI and disturbance model for Europe, Wildfire will strongly increase more than 883%. Bark beetle as well will increase distinctively with a percentage around 80%. And windstorm might have a stable path, but here also due to lack of robust future wind projection. This is actually this is also why we need to have an implementation mechanism as FoRISK. FoRISK was created by the Forest Europe ministers and endorsed in 2024. FoRISK is active since January 2025 with an overall objective to enhance resilient adaptation of forest and forest sector by support transboundary and cross-sectoral risk management within the framework of sustainable forest management. So we do have, we are here also as an ad hoc, let's say, implementation mechanism to this first webinar. FoRISK focal area are windstorm, biotic agent, and wildfire. We do collaborate with signatories of Forest Europe, with national and international experts, and the mandate and the topics that we discuss are defined by our donors as well as the national focal point of FoRISK. So it's an extreme inclusive process. We do also in FoRISK place a particular emphasis into prevention and preparedness, as also Johan was mentioning. We are noticing in the disturbance and crisis management field that there is a need of a shift. And we also aim to, as already mentioned, to look into forest adaptation in the short, medium, and long term. We have noticed that, and you also, as Johan also mentioned, and the loose colleagues, that this webinar aim to focus on natural disturbances, so also by embracing the damage part, and my colleague Roman after me will, with the keynote, will also touch base on these two terminology. We also wish to give a full picture of what's happening in the, with some cases in the pan-European region as well as in the UNECE region, to learn a bit more about practical good practices, practical cases, policy responses on such challenges which relate to natural disturbances. You have noticed that we have a diverse speaker selection. I'm very glad to have them with us today. I'm glad also to initiate this conversation. We have expertise from policymakers, from more practical oriented, from more international organization. So I think it's a very nice mix that we have today. I'm asking all my speakers to please, to our speakers, pardon, to stick to the time because it's quite tight. We are gonna have a lunch break together, but our food might be ready at 1 or 1:10. So please, let's stick to the minutes that we agreed upon. Say that, I think I'll stop now talking too much. I wish really to invite our first speaker to the podium, to our virtual podium. And here we have the pleasure to have with us Roman Michalak, representative of UNECE, which will showcase the latest studies of UNECE, which is also connected to the SoEF 2025. Mika is part, Roman, pardon, you're part of the Economic Affairs, the Economic Affairs Officer in the Forest and Bioeconomy section under the Environment and Forest Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Roman, if you're ready, I think we're gonna, please, I give you the floor, and here we go. I see your presentation now. If you put the presentation mode, it might take a minute. Here we go. Yes, Roman, the floor is yours.
Started. So thank you very much for this invitation. And in this presentation, in 10 minutes or maybe 9 left, I would like to just put some light on forest damage, disturbance, state trends implications. Sorry, now it works, I think. And then we heard about forest damage in the pan-European region. In my presentation, I would like to expand this picture and talk a little bit more about northern temperate and boreal forests. And most of them are in the boreal region, as you can see on this slide. forests in the region cover about 1.8 billion hectares, which is 42% of the global total. And land cover, they cover 39% of land, which is almost similar to the Forest Europe region, 35. However, you can see on this slide that per person, per capita, the coverage in the EC region is much higher, 1.3, than in the Forest Europe region, which has some implications, of course, for forest damage, as it comes from the higher population of the Forest Europe region. So what about forest damage in the EC region? Let us start with fires. And like in Europe, forest fires are increasing in all parts of the EC region. However, this data ends here on 2021. The trend from partial data shows that it continues. In 2020, already using data from few countries that reported, the total value exceeded 19 million hectares of forest with damaged by fire. Of course, in this case, trends is dominated by two sub-regions, and with blue you have trends in Russian Federation, and with the green the trends in North America. What about other damage? And again, situation is similar to the one presented for Forest Europe. So there is an increasing trend, and insects dominate this reporting. Damage done by insects dominate by this this reporting, in particular in Northern America. However, all of them indicate increasing trend. Here also it's important to say that the challenges that we face with reporting on forest damage. Methodologies are not harmonized, and it is, however, we see here put together damage done by insects, diseases, wildlife. In fact, impact on forests is very differentiated.
Ramaswamy, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you speak closer to the mic, because you're having difficulties to hear, so that's going to be helping us a little bit. Maybe if you put your headset on. Pardon for that. Try now.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Fantastic. Way much better. Yeah, please go ahead. Thank you very much. Super. Thank you.
So this damage, in fact, has different impact on forests. Sometimes different thresholds are used to report damage as a damage. So this is about how countries reported recently on forest damage in the EC region. Given the nature of forest damage, is difficult to predict how this develops in the future. The overall system is even more complicated because of changing climate. And on this slide, you can see the global mean temperature trend, just recently published by the World Meteorological Organization. And you see this trend is evident. So again, it's difficult to very precisely predict how this trend impacts forests, or what are the implications from that. However, if we look at the annual temperature anomalies in 2025 compared to the last 20 years period, you could see that actually temperate and boreal forests are the, in general, most affected by these changes. So this was about climate, just to highlight, but what about forests? And there are several indicators to look how they develop, but I just choose one, which is growing stock. And while it is positive development that growing stock of the region's forest increased here about 30%. This is also linked with other phenomena, that forests are getting, of course, more voluminous, but also older. and by this they are more exposed to possible future changes. To complicate the picture even more, we have to remember also that the damage is part of forest disturbance, which is the broader term. And here, briefly, can be explained as changing in ecological functions and interaction that are more value neutral, while damage is the part of forest disturbance. However, this is this part where there are some negative impacts to values given by humans, often in economic terms, but can be also expressed differently. And it is very important in addressing forest disturbance and damage to find the balance between naturalness and development of ecosystems and protection of those values given to forests by humans. In this simple graph, which is purely theoretical, I just presented some of them, which are important in terms of protecting forests. So what is important are human safety, provision of products, carbon storage, climate adaptation, naturalness. And depending which of them predominate in particular area, there will be different reaction from owners, managers, policymakers in addressing these risks and damages. In this case, the blue line represents the reaction where active protection is applied, minimizing risk and protecting resource, while the brown one presents the scenario where natural development is chosen as a reaction to forest damage. So, in conclusion, let me present the quotation from our report published last year, where maintaining forest health is about balancing ecosystems' naturalness with the services it provides to people. And finding this balance is crucial to forest policy and management. And I expect that in the next part of this webinar, we hear from colleagues about how this is in practice applied in countries. Thank you very much, and back to you, Silvia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. Very insightful overall presentation. Thanks also for sharing the recent data from UNECE, for mentioning to us that forest damage data are not harmonized. More work here is necessary, and that forest disturbances are really complex. So we really need to look in and break different silos, and also you touch base, and I really liked it. I already mentioned to you the implication that we need really to reflect when dealing with disturbances and damage that really relates to the aim that we have in the forest, the target group that we are looking at, and really then narrow it down, looking of course into the overall picture. As also Roman, you mentioned, the second part of this webinar, we enter into a panel discussion. We are going to have 3 cases from different Forest Europe signatories, where we wish actually to listen to their cases, to learn as well, increasing awareness and exchange also on these latest practices, and to also understand among what has been happening in the cases selected, and learning from each other, which is also a core business and item also for Forest Europe, as well as for FoRISK as a baby of Forest Europe. So say that I wish to open and invite to the podium our second speaker first for the panel, which is presenting us the case number 1 with related to wildfire. So welcome to João Verde. João will represent Portugal and will present us the fire governance framework approach that has been developed. João, you are head for integrated management policy from the National Agency for Integrated Management of Rural Fire. So João, I ask you to please start sharing, and the floor is totally yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Silvia. I can see you made your research. Anyway, good day, everyone. My name is João Verde. I'm the head of policy at the Portuguese Agency for Integrated Rural Fire Management. And in the next few minutes, I want to quickly walk you through Portugal's experience with integrated fire management and, well, leave a clear call to action that I believe applies far beyond Portuguese borders. You know, mainland Portugal covers almost 9 million hectares, and most of it can sustain fire, which is a challenge in itself. And also, wildfires have always been a part of our landscape, but 2017 was a national tragedy with more than 100 fatalities and over 500,000 hectares burned. So that's 6% of the entire country. What were the main pain points that we found after that? To name just a few, I will spare you reading the slide. You can have it yourself, but the system was fragmented. There was agricultural abandonment that had turned land into forest with ineffective fuel management. We had way too many ignitions, unprepared communities, no standard procedures. We could see that on qualification, well, it was uneven across organizations. Knowledge was missing a lessons learned process, and governance was unstable. Leadership changed frequently. There was a clear gap between prevention and suppression, no specialized command structure, and no polycentric decision making. But if before 2017, the system operated in 3 siloed containers, those of prevention, surveillance, and suppression, with no integrated governance, and planning was strictly top-down and centralized. Suppression budgets dwarfed prevention spending completely. Monitoring and accountability were weak, and success was mostly measured by burnt area. Today, let me tell you, the picture is, I would say, quite different. We now have I would say, also a true integrated fire management system with the participation of all stakeholders. There are new governance committees bringing all of those stakeholders together to agree on national strategy and local priorities as well. Because you see, planning has become circular and flexible. It still starts top-down from the very beginning, but cascades to the local level where real execution happens. KPIs flow upwards and inform the next cycle, thus a circular planning system. Also, the law now recognizes that different landscapes need different measures. Therefore, regions and municipalities can adapt strategies while still meeting national obligations. Regarding investment, it has been rebalanced dramatically. Prevention funding has grown so much that it now matches or slightly exceeds suppression spending, but it's roughly, I would say, a 50-50 split. Total annual investment jumped from little over 100 million in 2017 to nearly 600 million today. And this is made under a regular, transparent, and public monitoring. There are yearly reports that go to government, to parliament, and to the public as well. Every stakeholder's responsibilities are clearly defined, and performance is tracked on a dedicated platform. So we have come far beyond just counting burnt areas to measure success. So you see, we've come a long way, but of course we're not done yet. This is a work in progress and might be for quite a while. Please do remember that change is hard on people and organizations. Funding can dry up. Other priorities can come up as well. High-level political endorsement can fade. So there are some pitfalls that we should recognize, not to repeat them in our own jurisdictions. But that brings me to what I consider would be the most important thing, the call to action. We definitely need to break silos and strengthen governance so that knowledge and cooperation can flow freely. There's no possibility for success if open cooperation doesn't happen. And we definitely have to accept the good fire on the landscape. Total fire removal is a failing strategy. We must work with decision makers and communities to stop wanting to suppress all fire at all costs. Of course, we have to value rural areas because we all understand people will not protect the things they do not value. So we must have knowledge of rural value and create a sound economy around those activities and products. We have to invest and spend efficiently. We have to know the risk. What are we defending from loss? Because resources, of course, are always finite. Ask for standards. They make cooperation far easier. And there's a lot of other things in the call to action that you can think about. I would conclude by saying that I believe that the journey we had in Portugal has proven that integrated fire management does work. But it does require political will, balanced budgets, and adaptive planning. Clear roles, constant public accountability. These lessons, I believe, are universal. They move from reactive suppression to a proactive landscape scale resilience. And I invite you to follow the same path we have been on. So thank you for your time. Just a little bit over the 5 minutes, I think. Sorry, Silvia.
Totally fine. Thanks a lot. It was very great also for us to learn really the path that you've taken and the developments for this integrated fire management. As you mentioned, breaking the silos was really a key. The value of the rural area, the value also of fire that can be a good tool in order to avoid uncontrolled and unplanned fire, and also the element of governance and cooperation as key to, and the invitation to colleagues to really reflect upon integrated fire management. I wish now also to ask you something, João, because also in FoRISK we were also a bit wondering, discussing also with other colleagues, and I think you can give us a good reflection here. How can we, the policy frameworks that you also have developed in this long time frame, then support the transition from a reactive crisis management that we have seen over the past years into a more proactive and risk-aware forest management that then will support us in building our resilient and more adapted forest. I would be very glad if in the next 4 minutes you can cover this for us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Silvia. I truly believe that a policy framework can definitely introduce clear monitoring and adaptive management models. With measurable KPIs, things you can measure success with. And I think that that's linked with risk-informed planning and decision. And also with the shift from funding and incentivizing towards a performance-based payment, credits, or some sort of subsidies. And that leans more on risk reduction activities like thinning, prescribed burns, or, well, fuel management techniques at large. It heavily informs decision makers, and I believe these policy frameworks definitely help, because we understand decision makers are highly pressed by communities to react and come up with one-stop shop solutions, quick things they can provide in the next year. That's not feasible for the most part when you are dealing with forests. So they have to have some sort of they need information to make sound decisions and to support themselves in. And I truly believe that if you have a good policy framework they can follow and that they can use to inform their constituents about why they are choosing to go this way other than other more reactive, or in parallel. You will probably not stop policymakers from being reactive. They will always be reactive to some extent, but you have to provide them with support, information to help them balance things and be more preventative and not as reactive. But that's what I believe policy frameworks can definitely do.
Thanks, Joao. I'm glad to hear that really you focus and you elaborated more on the policy framework and really on the necessity also to support communities, to support policymaker and advisor, and how a bit you did it. And I think this is also something that in collaboration with Forest Europe and FoRISK, we're also trying to do. And it's definitely not it's not an easy job. You have seen it also for you. It takes time. It takes also, you need to have a strong evidence and science-based for that and patient. But that's a really good tips from your side. I thank you a lot, and we'll get back to you in a bit of time. I wish colleagues to pass to our second case, and the case related to windstorm. We move now geographically to Scotland, that developed over the past year as well, a contingent plan, also in this case quite effective and quite, I sometimes use the word unique. We also came across this case in FoRISK with our experience supporting the Irish colleagues last year. So I'm very happy to welcome here William Clark from the Forest Transport and Innovation, is the Forest and Transport and Innovation Advisor, from the Scottish Forestry, and Jason Hubert, Head of the Forest Sector Development from the Scottish Forestry. If I'm not mistaken, William, you'll take the floor first with your presentation. I stop here talking, and if you're ready, I'll give you the floor, and you also have your 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Silvia. My name is William Clark. I'm joined today by Jason Hubert. We're part of the Forest Sector Development team at Scottish Forestry. Slide, please. A new slide, please.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
Oh, quite all right. Quite all right. So we're here today to talk about wind blow, and I just thought it would be useful to give you a bit of context around what we're talking about. You know, we've heard from other speakers today about the difference between disturbance and damage, and I think at the far end of that, we need to be able to consider major damage. Excuse me. So at the top, you can see some wind-thrown trees. In the bottom left, these are major storms according to the wind blow thresholds over the last 75 years. So as you can see, we get a major storm over 1 million metres cubed. The average is about 2 million metres cubed on that, about every 10 years. Now, dialing into Scotland, this is UK figures, and this is Scottish figures. So storms exceeding 90 miles an hour. So like I say, at the major end of that spectrum of damage, we need to be able to differentiate what are effectively natural processes, even if they are extreme, from major or catastrophic wind blows. So the graph here shows the number of named storms per year, the number of red storms, so that's exceeding 90 miles an hour, and the incidence of them. So it's about an average of 2 red storms per year, and that is how many activations. Again, not all activations mean that we have a major storm. There are threshold values in a gated process that lead into that, and to manage that extreme events, we have the wind blow contingency plan. Slide, please. So I've got to start my time. So this is the wind blow contingency plan. It activates at 90 miles an hour, like I say. It's an annualised programme which runs from October to March in terms of monitoring the storms. But then they're recognising that this is about preparation and prevention. There is also a parallel research programme which runs October to October, so it's annually and it's aligned so that it can feed into the other part of the programme. Forestry is devolved in the UK. So our organisation, Scottish Forestry, was created in 2019. So although the wind blow contingency plan existed before that, there was such a big structural change at national level. It's useful to think about this as a new version. So it's a multi-agency response. We are the regulator, we look after policy, and then our sister organisation, Forestry and Land Scotland, own 40% of Scotland's forests on behalf of the government. We've recognised, though, it's not just about us, so the strategy provides us a platform for coordination across public and private industry. And I would also highlight that we work in parallel to the normal emergency responses. So one of the things that changed in 2019, the roles and responsibilities changed. We're not an emergency responder, that gets handed to somebody else. So it's really useful to be able to clearly define what our activities are within that. Thank you. As mentioned, it's activated by a red warning, which is greater than 90 miles an hour. Depending on directionality and other factors, that would really lead into whether or not it was a catastrophic storm. It's the threshold value is 1 million meters cubed, or the annual cut within any one of the 5 national forest inventory regions for Scotland. But it's proactive, so it's as much focused on prevention and preparation as it is reaction after a storm. When we do get a storm, the process is evidence-led. As we travel down the flowchart there, the costs increase, so we try to protect them as far as possible. So it's evidence-led, it's subjective in the first part, and then it's done by survey. Initially, it's satellite surveys at low resolution, and then later on we do a balancing statistic. If there has been a major storm, we would then do a further survey in the summer when there's better clarity. Progression is by consensus. Information is generally very poor at the start of the event, so we use a subjective network, a diffuse network of people to feed in the preliminary results. Once we are confident at day 5, we would then escalate that. If it does look like it's been a major storm, that we would escalate that to the next stage and then the next stage, according to that consensus, as I mentioned. The key thing, as forestry evolved and new organisations were created, this document was built to clarify our roles and our partnership roles across the organisation, how we relate to each other within that, the relationships between the organisations, the processes, people know exactly what is happening, when it's happening and how it's happening. The timescales, when can you expect this type of information, this data, these decisions to happen? So it's clarity for us, it's clarity for government, and it's clarity for the industry, entirely in parallel to the emergency response. So it's built so that we stay out the road of that, and then it also helps us manage the expectations around data quality and completeness. Slide, please. So very limited time to talk today with 5 minutes, so we're just going to do a quick deep dive on Arwen. So this was the first major storm since 2019 our organisation formed, and since that restructuring of the Windblow contingency plan. I would always highlight with Windblow, the satellites are still relatively new, and they were very new back in 2021. We had to develop bespoke methods to be able to measure the Windblow at that time. That method, it took a while to identify 1.7 million meters cubed of damage. It's inherently difficult to access and harvest. It caused major disruptions to planned operations during the storm, but then subsequently as we tried to clear it as well. I would highlight, once you start to cut to wind farm edge, that pushes out that figure well beyond your initial measurement, because you need to clear access, you need to cut to the wind farm edge, so you're looking at another 10 to 30% damage within that. Once you're in that stage, because that's to be certified timber, it's significant harvesting and market distortion. As that process goes along, windblown timber obviously has its own shelf life, but then there's additional risk enhancers for wildfires, pests and various others, which all together means that forest sector recovery can be a very long process. And just as a closing, concluding statement, I just want to quote one of our countrymen, Alexander Graham Bell: before anything else, preparation is the key to success. So this is about promoting better silvicultural practices, better management practices, and better ways of managing continuity at forest level. Slide, please. Thank you very much. If this QR code leads you to our Windblow pages if you want more information, but both Jason and myself are more than happy to talk to anybody. So thank you very much.
William, thanks for this. Thanks really for this overview of the contingency plan in Scotland. That really teaches us a bit the strategy of how to adapt and dealing with major storm. And you also highlighted that strategic coordination. It's really a key, as well as public and private industry that also need to be informed, well informed. You need also how to manage expectation. There is a specific path that you highlighted, which is absolutely essential. And also the cross-pollination or intersectional element among different disturbances, because we know very well that after windstorm might also come spark, beetle, but that's also something that we are all aware. From the FoRISK side, I think we already chat about it. We worked and supported an Irish colleague when Storm Ewing came in 2025, and we tried it also to support on the side of the recovery and response post-disturbance. So what I was very curious, I am actually very curious to ask you is how such a elaborated and well thought and insightful contingency plan have been developed, ensuring the involvement of all the stakeholders that you have that you had involved, that you are there, that were interested, that were affected, and also maintaining the interest of the policymaker. May you or Jason elaborate on that? I would really appreciate it. A bit also looking back now to understand how can we think about it in our country to replicate such complex and well thought process. Thank you.
Maybe I'll step in here. I think one of the benefits I think we have in the Scottish sort of forestry sector overall is we have very good links between policymakers, the government, and the private sector. We have quite a good private sector organisation, CONFOR, who not only represent the forest owners but also the processors. So for us, in a sense, it's very useful then to have a conversation with a small group of people rather than having to deal with large numbers of different groups. So it was much more easily at the beginning, especially at the beginning, to talk to the key individuals, and then they can disseminate the information through their networks out through the private sector. One of the biggest challenges for Arwen was actually because Scottish Forestry was only set up in 2019. It was, and as William said, it was the first time we actually put this plan into operation. It was making everyone aware of what our capacity was and what their capacity needed to be, and to make sure that balance of understanding, because that was bizarrely some of the biggest conversations around what they expected us to do as the government and what actually we think what you guys should be doing, because you own the forests and you essentially will buy the timber. Because you have to remember that it is insurable. It's an insurable risk still, and you can actually salvage the timber. So there is still some worth in it. So our role was essentially to try and coordinate people, bring the processes together with the owners, and sort of mitigate sort of the worst impacts of suddenly having huge amounts of timber arrive on the market all at once. So it's a bit more managed supply into the market.
Thank you very much, Jason, for really highlighting the importance of the link that between government or governmental bodies and private sector. And as also mentioned by you and William, expectation are really key, and clear role and guidance. And I'm also quite intrigued to also learn that your agency took the role of coordination and supporting, but also a basis was really also to listening to all the stakeholders that were involved, and also then at the end also to mitigate the impact on the market, which is something we also notice with the Irish colleagues. So it's really, there are different contexts, but there are key elements that what we also need to reflect upon and bring to the next cases. And this is really the breaking the silos approach from my point of view, and the transboundary support. Each case is unique, we know that, but there are principles that we can really learn from each other. That's really a core principle also of this discussion today, and also what our FoRISK group is doing. Thank you, both of you. I think we are running quite a little bit late, but no stress at the moment. You will hear me if this is happening, but I wish to open the case number 3. That is the case on the biotic agents, which, as mentioned, are extremely connected to windstorm, but not only. So we have now the case of a representative from Czech Republic, which will then tell us a bit what's happening, or what happened as they experience very severe outbreaks. So welcome, Tomáš Křeža. Tomáš is the director of the Department of Forest Policy and Economics at the Ministry of Agriculture in Czech Republic. Tomáš, you have your beloved 5 minutes, so the presentation is going to be ready for you. So I leave the floor to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Silvia, and good afternoon, colleagues. I would like to brief you about the Czech case, which is bark beetle outbreak in Czechia that principally took place since 2018 to 2022. Next slide, please. In the beginning, I would like to show you some figures, and here you can see the development of harvesting in the long run. And I would like to start saying that the reason for or the cause of this outbreak was different than in past. Usually it was linked to windstorms, as mentioned by Silvia, but this case it was completely different, and it was caused by long-term drought, which started a couple years ago, but first milestone was 2015 and some drought that year. And then 2018, which was really extreme, and there was already increased population of bar beetle and very extreme weather conditions throughout all the year, like drought, spells of heat waves during the summer period. So we had three complete generations of bar beetle that year, and it was really disaster. And the peak was in 2020. We almost double, or more than doubled annual removals up to 35.5 million cubic meters, and 95% of this was just sanitary felling. Next slide, please. Here you can see the development of reforestation and the development of unstocked forest area during this crisis. And just to summarize that, more than 200,000 hectares of coniferous forests, mostly spruce forest, has been destroyed, and the intensity was different across the country. So there were regions where the growing stock was destroyed up to 40%. And reforestation, of course, lagged a bit behind the harvesting. So the peak was in 2022-23, and still in 2024. We had about 40,000 hectares of unstocked forest areas, which is almost twice as high as normal periods. One positive issue was, for example, that we increased the use of nature regeneration during those years. Next slide, please. And now I would like to concentrate what was our response, which was very complex, but our basic presumption is that we have to create resilient forests well adapted to climate change, because only such a forest can provide all the services for the society. So adaptation of forest to climate change, that's the utmost objective of every our activities. And we started with changing of state forest policy until 2035. There's a small mistake. During the crisis, we started by adjusting ministerial decrees, which is much easier than to go into Forest Act. So we started adjust decrees, which were in past very prescriptive. So we tried to make them more flexible for forest owners, and to translate to it some knowledge and lessons learned. It concerned forest protection, forest regeneration, also forest management planning. But then we moved also to changing Forest Act itself, again with the aim to provide more flexibility to forest owners to use all the natural processes that are needed. So we, for example, prolonged the obligatory time limits for forest restoration or regeneration and forest establishment after harvesting operations. We also shortened minimum rotation period, which was in past 80 years as a general limit, down to 60 years. That would allow us also to change the tree species composition and to adapt mostly spruce monocultures, or and to change them to more complex structures. We also broadened the range of tree species that can be used for reforestation, and broadened the use of pioneer species as a preparatory species for the development of new forest stands. There was also one failure, principal failure, and that was amendment or our attempt to amend Game Management Act, because we need to protect newly established forest stands. But there was no consensus in the parliament, and it was already several attempts to amend it to reduce too high stocks of hoofed game, but we were not successful on this. And I also mentioned in the presentation subsidies provided to forest owners, both in the crisis. In the first phase, it was kind of compensation for the lost income, but just partial, just to survive that severe period, and to keep forest enterprises functioning. And then subsidies for forest restoration, which are still going on. They are provided not only for reforestation, but also for thinning, which was neglected in the time of the crisis. It's also a very important part of adaptation of forest stands to climate change. And I just want to mention National Wood Policy, which is a new document, but its purpose is not to increase harvesting, but rather to use efficiency of using forest resources and to produce forest products with higher added value. So I also put it on the list. It's just for the beginning, and I'm ready to answer any question or to add detail in the discussion.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Tomasz. Thanks also for telling us a bit, quite also in a nice menu actually of the policy reaction and action that has been taken in place due to the outbreaks that have been experienced, not only, as you also highlighted, post-wind, but also due to drought and extreme weather. It's really interesting to see the full picture in your country, looking also at the new forest state policy, as well as the series of subsidies or the series of action, also more from a management point of view. Let me also again link it once more to the FoRISK work, to also looking at different cases, and interesting how also to reach the policy maker advisor in order to react when such crises are in place. What I was also thinking a bit, and we also discussed today, and we've been mentioning this collaboration element is really key also among different sectors in order to produce functioning policies, which sometimes which can function very well, but also thanks for mentioning sometimes this won't, but we don't need to actually feel discouraged, but the opposite. What I was also a little bit wondering, Tomasz, in the context of Czech Republic, how did you see that the national and international collaboration play or will play a role in the field of crisis management, also to to improve something, or also which perspective can bring in? I would be happy if you answer these, and we stick it to 4 minutes if you can, please. Thank you, Tomasz.
Thank you. Concerning the cooperation during the crisis itself, or during that outbreak, I must say that we were not ready for that so much. So we tried to cooperate with anyone who was willing to help us with any aspect of managing the crisis at the time. So it happened mostly at the national level. So we were in close touch with cooperation with other ministries, like especially Ministry of Trade and Industry, Ministry of Transportation, because to a large extent it was a logistic problem at the time. So like transporting large amounts of timber across the country on the railway. So there were questions like securing enough freight cars, for example. So it was kind of learning by fighting. But I would like to stress cooperation with stakeholders like forest owners. So one of successful stories is development of advisory services during this crisis, development of, for example, web pages which are still functioning. They are provided both by state-supported forest protection service, which is in place for many decades, but also some of them has been also developed by private companies or like forestry journals, for example, or certification schemes. So they are still in place and provide many information to forest owners even now. So some predictions, some recommendations how to protect forest to prevent the outbreak to repeat. And for the future, I would like to stress that we rely not only of those state services, but we also try to involve more academia. So we have now long-term agreement between the ministry and Czech University of Life Sciences, and together with them we try to build another tools to support forest owners and forest managers. So that cooperation with Czech University of Life Sciences has two dimensions: national towards our stakeholders, forest owners, forest managers, but also international, because we would like to actively contribute to the development of FoRISK, and to provide some in-kind support in terms of experts, providing premises for meetings, also some expertise to develop policy briefs or some materials that could be then provided not only to our foresters, but let's say Europe-wide as part of Forest Europe.
Thanks a lot, Thomas. Thank you very much. Also quite an insightful answer related to the cooperation, the learning by doing, several support tools that you have in Czech Republic. Also the key elements that also academia and scientists are supporting the ministry too, and also the international part together with the FoRISK network. Speakers, you have 1 minute each, and this time I have to be extremely sharp. I wish to hear a bit from you, the reflection, the closing statement today. What do you wish us to bring in our bucket and then reflect upon this evening and during the upcoming weeks? Roman, you go first. 60 seconds. We hear you very well. Please.
Thank you very much. It's getting evident that forest risk and damage are growing, and we have to face it. And we may have also faced situation that we have not experienced so far. So preparedness is essential. I think we also in this webinar we heard that we are also not armless. That countries develop the tools. They are getting better prepared and for this situation. However, taking into account this unexpected trends, it is essential to collect various type of information from different sources that would equip us better. So these efforts done by countries, by organizations, are address the challenge in efficient, effective way. Thank you.
Thank you, Roman. So I highlighted the collection of information is essential from your point of view. Thank you very much. Joao, what did you want to share with our participant today? 1 minute, 60 seconds. Thanks.
Thank you, Silvia. Under 60 seconds, we can say we are witnessing increasing impacts from uncontrolled and unplanned fire, i.e. wildfires, of course. So working on suppression alone is guaranteed to fail. There is a broader value chain that requires engagement from multiple areas of knowledge, society and government, an overarching approach, actually. So I invite you all to consider strengthening or initiating an integrated fire management model if you don't have one, to reduce impacts and to live alongside planned and controlled fire. There are already reference documents that can help shaping better future policies, and I hope we can all make use of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Joao. Very clear into the integrated fire management, essential to really reflect and have it a broad involvement, and to good fire, to control fire, also key to prevent. Thank you very much. My next in the list is William, also for you. 60 seconds, or is Jason preferring to? I leave it to you to decide. But I think it's...
Okay, well, I'll jump in. And so I think just getting a plan together before the event, even if ultimately when the event happens, you find your plan doesn't work very well, pulling people together and having had that discussion beforehand is absolutely vital. And then on top of that, it makes you think about how you would get the data, because having good data is essential for then developing a response afterwards, in our experience.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you very much from your experience in getting a plan before. That is something we really need to stress today. We're stressing the prevention element, getting also good data, and also involving the stakeholders that are also touched by the event. Thank you very much. And Tomasz, it's for you, the last closing 1 minute. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to stress that every crisis like our outbreak brings also opportunities. So opportunities to change policies, legislation to improve forest management, all cycle of forest risk management, also cooperation between among stakeholders, ministries and sectors of national economy. It triggers innovation in technologies, adjustment of methods of forest protection, accelerates processes such as changing the tree species composition or transition to closer to nature approaches. So it brings some opportunities, and also provide opportunity to share those lessons learned, and that's something that could be bring to FoRISK, and so as everybody can learn from experience of others.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tomasz. Also to highlight the crisis bring opportunities, innovation, and learning from each other is really key. Colleagues, thank you very much to all the panelists and the keynote speaker for your involvement and your also your presentation. I'm going to close briefly. What I've learned is really that recently, also from UNECE cases and also in Pan-Europe, are really telling us that prevention is really important, and that to face wind, biotic, and fire, we need really to connect policy action with practice to reflect and to involve the stakeholders that are also in the picture. Also remembering that we need information that are based on solid evidence. The key words I've been hearing today that I wish also to bring in my little pocket and reflect upon for our work over the upcoming months is really this multicultural, this multi-sectoral approach that is very important when dealing with risk. It's really the accurate and timely information that many of you also stressed is the preparation is success, and it's really essential to have a plan, as also underlined a minute ago. Crisis brings innovation. That's also something we need also to reflect upon, not only panic mode, but also additional opportunities, and sharing knowledge and experience across border is key. And this is one of the core business of FoRISK. SoEF also teach us that monitoring is also really, really important. Say that I wish to thank you all for your attention, for your extra time with us today. I want to also thank Luz for organizing this webinar series, which I think today was extremely interesting and insightful. I hope you all will have something to reflect upon. I hope you will find also these highlights and this overview useful in your work, and you're also gonna reflect a bit and fight for having a more preventive approach for natural disturbances, focusing really on collaboration, exchange with other expert colleagues. And also for you to know, FoRISK is here to support, so reach out also to us in case necessary. And also the Forest Europe colleagues are going to be happy to assist you. Say that I'll thank you all once more from your side. It's been a real pleasure seeing you, meeting you, and have a good rest of the day, good lunch break, and I pass the mic back to Lou's team. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Silvia. I firstly want to apologize for being this too long webinar. It's a challenge to cover this subject in this 1 hour format. And thank the audience and all the speakers for engaging in the webinar. And the presentation slides will be shared afterwards, where the speakers will consent to that. And I just want to advertise for our upcoming next webinar, the 22nd of May. And there will be more information on our website soon about the upcoming webinar. So with that, I will close this webinar and thank you, and I hope I see you again. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.